Hey everyone, what's up? My name is Muiz, and this is day two of Cloudways V webinar week, where we are celebrating 20 years of WordPress. A few minutes ago, Michelle conducted an amazing session on women in WordPress with amazing women who have contributed throughout the years to make WordPress what it is today. Now let's jump right into our second and final session of the day with none other than Mario Peshev. Mario is the CEO of Devrix, and he will speak on how WordPress has impacted the world of web development. Mario, first of all, how do you feel about WordPress turning 20 years?
Howdy. Super pumped. 20 years is, first off, it's quite a lot. Second, it's a pretty significant number. Most of us remember our 20s, and I'm really stoked that we are still pretty hooked to that incredible open source platform, contributing heavily, developing software, building websites. 20 years in, and the platform isn't going anywhere. In fact, it's still growing.
Yeah, and I think I would, start off with a question that I have asked almost every guest that have been on here. Is that what's your earliest memory with WordPress?
So, WordPress turning 20. My earliest memory is back in 2006. A media firm I was working for was building a blogging platform, and we had to export a competition. The live journals, the bloggers, and WordPress as well. So WordPress definitely made a great impression on me back in 2006. I spent some time playing with the platform, tried some blogging back in 2007, and almost fully transitioned to WordPress as early as 2008. So yeah, it's been almost 17 good years for me as well. Definitely don't regret that choice.
That's great. Yeah, so I think we should start off with the presentation. I'm assuming that you have something very interesting to show us today. So let's begin.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, let me share my screen. Share screen, and looking into the session. 20 years. So, what we're going to talk about is first off the future of WordPress, but starting with the past 20 years of WordPress and how WordPress has impacted the world of web development. Now, the goal behind that talk is actually kind of going through the backstory of WordPress and kind of some cross sections of the web development ecosystem over the past 20 years. I was lucky to be involved in the world of web development, starting with my first website that I built in 1999. This kind of goes through the reasons of why I picked WordPress, what made me convert, and kind of one of the reasons why so many different businesses decided to kind of switch to WordPress accordingly. So, for context, I'm a serial entrepreneur and the CEO of multiple businesses such as Devrix and Growth Open, Delphi Support, and a few more. My background is actually in software engineering. So, back when I kind of joined the WordPress bandwagon, I was building websites mobile applications, desktop applications, websites, assembler applications as well. So my background is in software engineering, including hardcore enterprise development. Nowadays, in addition to running several businesses, including Devrix, I'm also a business advisor for small and medium enterprises, normally $5 to $100 million. And my personal involvement in WordPress as a core contributor started with WordPress 3.7 when my first batch landed in the platform. So, without further ado, again, I just want to kind of start with the backstory. As already established, WordPress started back in 2003 on May 27 as an easy to use blogging platform. Now, why is that kind of important? Now, WordPress is used for so many different things. We're going to touch on some of them. CMS, social media platforms, e-commerce, and so many others. But it started as a blogging platform. The way it grew was through collaboration and community. Two very important words that we were focusing on. Again, the previous session was on women in WordPress and how important it is to support pretty much everyone how important it is to develop sub communities and make them work together towards the same common goal, and essentially do make the most out of that for the better good. Some important kind of steps in this kind of point zero, so to speak, because we're as an engineers we're starting from zero, is WordPress 3.0 was a pretty significant major release, introducing custom post types. Many of you building websites or using tools like advanced custom fields or WP types or something else are so used to custom post types, but we didn't used to have UI behind that early on. So this was pretty significant. And WordPress 5.0 that landed the Gutenberg editor, the block editor, and completely revolutionized the way that websites were being built or conceptualized, or the entire block experience, so to speak. So again, talking about 20 years of history, what were the early days of WordPress looking like? Back in 2003, well, 2001, 2002, 2003, there were several blogging tools such as MobileType, LiveJournal, and Blogger that owned the space. There were a few more, but these are kind of some of the giants. And most people that actually tried to do any form of blogging whatsoever were kind of using or trying to play with these platforms. There again, it was easier to work with a hosted platform first and foremost, simply because you go in and sign up and you use a platform that's already there. You sign up for your username and password, and you get your own blog. Fewer people were able to set up their own platform. It used to take a while, required more development skills, figuring out how to run a web server and domain, and going through install processes and all that jazz. So one of the key ingredients in making WordPress successful was the story of WordPress, which actually started with B2. B2 was an open source blogging platform that was founded by an indie developer who more or less disappeared, who kind of just abandoned the project for personal reasons, looking for a job and kind of spending time on kind of different initiatives, because open source takes quite a lot of time. And back at the time, lots of indie hackers and developers were already trying to work with B2 and tried to build on top of B2 accordingly. One of the forks of B2 was called WordPress, founded by Matt Mullenweg and Mike Liddell. And this fork was named as the official um, the official fork that B2 said, hey, B2 is no longer supported, so let's all move to WordPress. That's kind of the short version. The history of WordPress is actually, there's a book in GitHub that was open sourced by Siobhan McKeown, I think, if I'm not messing something up, but she worked on that over a decade ago. So there's some open source history that was vetted and validated, and you can kind of go through the early romantic stories of how WordPress came to life. But it's important to understand the history, and we are also going to talk about the install as well. It's important to understand the history of how a platform came to life, what was the initial offering, what was the backstory of that, so that we can actually derive some lessons and figure out, what's that experience like. So once again, one of the reasons back in the day for people to be using hosted platforms was the fact that setting up an open source platform was hard. People weren't as familiar with domains and hosting and PHP versions and MySQL and all the other stuff. And it was just easier to sign up for a specific tool. B2 introduced a pretty incredible setup process, kind of an automatic installer that solved a lot of the issues. And this was kind of one of the reasons why it came popular back in the day. The other thing was it was an open source PHP software that, PHP happened to be the most comprehensive and the easiest to set up language. Well, platforms written in PHP were so easy to set up, which was the reason why, B2 gained some adoption back in the day as well. So what kind of happened at some point of the process is that most of these systems actually became paid one way or another, premium, behind paywalls or so, and they were no longer as attractive for indie bloggers as they used to be. At the same time, B2 introduced that quick and easy bootstrap process, and that really made the adoption of WordPress easier. So Mike Little worked on an enhanced version of that install process, which is currently existing in the WordPress core, making it possible for WordPress to be set up in in a matter of minutes. And Matt Mullenweg used the famous 5 minute install as a catchphrase to actually introduce that to people with, hey, we have that famous 5 minute install. This is one of the key benefits of WordPress. It's one of the key reasons why people go for WordPress. It's so easy to set up. You get all these features. You get all that kind of ease of use, similarly to the hosted platforms, but you own 100% of that. You can play with it, you can modify it, you can fine tune it, and that's what makes it so powerful. That's kind of what introduced the future of WordPress. Matt was an early adopter of open source, GPL, and open standards, so that's why he was so adamant on making everything open source. And this was a great and incredible moment for open source software to grow in the early 2000s. And one other thing to mention, kind of as a key benefit to the previous slide, is blogs back then actually didn't used to have a title. So by introducing a title in B2 and then further in WordPress, WordPress actually established the trend of creating blogs with a title. So previously, blog posts used to be like tweets or Facebook posts, Instagram posts, or so. They were just a piece of copy. And the concept of a title, just as a chapter of a book or whatever, was introduced by WordPress. So that's pretty interesting and kind of one of the reasons why WordPress used to be a trendsetter, making so many differences. Now, another thing that made WordPress popular was the PHP stack. Now, for those of you who aren't as tech savvy, WordPress is written in PHP and other things like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But PHP is the core backend programming language. And this is pretty important for the adoption of an open source software. Now, there are other great tools, blogging platforms, CMS frameworks, whatever, in other programming languages like Java or C# or Python or Ruby or so. Great tools. However, in terms of adoptability, in terms of building a software that runs everywhere, PHP was and more or less still is the dominant programming language for running a software platform. Uh, uh, right now, PHP runs, I think, 77 or 78% of all websites online, meaning that more or less 4 out of 5 websites online are built in PHP. This could be WordPress or Laravel or anything written in a PHP framework like Symfony or Zend or so, or the other CMS platforms like Joomla or Drupal, for example. But in any case, PHP is the most widespread, the easiest to run. Almost every hosting solution and provider is maintaining and supporting PHP, making it so easy to receive mass adoption and low cost prices and kind of adopting the install process for a platform. Back in the day, forum platforms were also popular. And again, PHP BB or VBulletin were also among the most popular platforms for the same reason. They were in PHP. It was easy to adopt, easy to install, easy to set up. Same goes for gallery software like Gallery 2 and so forth. So understanding the decision making behind how we build a piece of software, how we maintain and support adoption is part of the reasons why WordPress is successful. There's kind of premeditated effort in trying to predict and understand how to receive mass adoption, how to make it appealing and attractive, and at the same time affordable, easy to use, quick to set up, and that's kind of what makes it such a wonderful platform. Now, WordPress hooks. Now, there used to be, and even so, right now there are so many different platforms that are either closed source or not very flexible, not really easy to set up or modify or show. And hooks made WordPress so powerful from the get-go. Extensibility and the ability to add new pieces of software to interfere with the load process of WordPress, to interfere with the WordPress life cycle was so powerful. The ability to filter data made it possible to introduce different pieces of content within the body of WordPress. In the very early days, when you write a piece of a blog post, you could have molded and filtered that piece of content, your blog post, added preface something, a disclaimer, or added something at the end of the post, like a call to action after each and every blog post. The more content you add, the more important it is to automate all those tedious procedures and be able to process data at scale. It's really so important. Just imagine a library, imagine a publishing website with hundreds of thousands of posts. It's so important to be able to kind of replicate that behavior. So that's kind of one of the key aspects of WordPress. Over time, WordPress had been adding more and more and more and more hooks whenever it makes sense to ensure that the life cycle can be molded and interfered with in the best possible manner as well. Now, another great reason back in the early days is the so-called pixel perfect design capabilities of WordPress. Now, luckily, pixel perfect is not really what designers aim for, and that had been the case for over a decade, I would say, ever since responsive design came to life. However, early on, there were fewer devices. The mobile internet wasn't as popular, so most people were building for desktop. And most people used to be building for a couple of different browsers, such as Internet Explorer and Firefox at best, and a couple of different resolutions, because again, resolutions, video cards, and monitors weren't as widespread. Nowadays, things are different. We have tons of devices, different landscape and portrait views. We have desktop, mobile, and tablet views. We have so many different resolutions, including 4K and now even 8K, and it's possible to make things pixel perfect. But previously, it used to be very important. And moreover, when it comes to flexibility, alternative platforms weren't as flexible. Now, people had two options. They either do a bespoke build from scratch with a framework, or even starting with PHP or another programming language from scratch, which used to take thousands and thousands and thousands of hours or more, or they use a CMS similar to WordPress that poses limitations. The system says, hey, the sidebar needs this markup, or it's yielding this output, or there are these divs or spans or so generated there, or the menu does that, or the footer does that, or you always have to have that div on top or so. And whenever a designer produces something like a PSD file, like a Photoshop file back then, it weren't fully compatible with the other system. And WordPress was the first dominant platform that said you can do whatever you want in terms of design in building a WordPress theme. Almost all of the components, like again, menu and sidebar and so forth, were moldable in a sense of you can attune what sort of markup is used there, what sort of classes for every single specific website and theme, so that it's fully compatible with whatever you're designing. And even if you can't, for whatever reason, you can go with a streamlined static HTML and only pull the output from the backend. This level of flexibility was one of the leading reasons why so many incredible design awards used to be won back in the early 2000s by WordPress, because there were no other system like WordPress in terms of design flexibilities. And that leads me to the second piece, the extensive template hierarchy. The way WordPress works is there is the so-called template hierarchy, which says which file from the WordPress core, or your WordPress theme in that case, is going to be used in every single case. By definition, every theme has an index.php file, which is used for everything, and the style CSS file, which is used for styling. But you can add so many different files starting right to left for different types of reasons. Single PHP for posts, page PHP for pages, home PHP for the homepage, 404 PHP for errors, and so forth. But then you can go so granular and say, okay, I want something for single files, but I also want single specific post type, or singular specific post type, but then single post in a specific category, but then single with a specific ID or a specific slug, right? So when you have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of blog posts, you can drop specific plug-in files, just a specific template file that only loads for that specific page or that specific category or under specific circumstances, right? So this made it possible for publishers to completely revolutionize their experience and introduce so many different features in terms of look and feel, in terms of branded content, sponsored content, any form of ad management, unique campaigns, custom deals, anything to make it profitable and successful and beautiful, of course, due to the fact that WordPress provided that infinite extensibility with its template hierarchy. Again, this cannot be understated. It really made WordPress immensely powerful, being able to set up so quickly, wide adoption on every host out there, 5-minute install, unlimited design opportunities, and then custom flexibility at scale, even for sites with hundreds of thousands of millions of posts. SEO first, I'm not going to delve too deep into that, but WordPress is really optimized for on site SEO, meaning that the platform itself yields pretty decent default markup for search engine optimization, for Google in particular. It also introduced, I think, even back in B2, probably, or maybe the early versions of WordPress, pingbacks and trackbacks, ensuring that new posts are tracked as early as possible and other links are also intercepted between other websites, which kind of poses that so-called organic first modality. I've been in the SEO universe for 15 years, even not as active myself, but I've attended many competitions where even SEO experts using Joomla or Drupal or other systems on a daily basis used to apply with WordPress on SEO competitions simply because it was more powerful, easier to rank with, and easier to start with. So that means a lot. And once again, because social media networks come and go, we see what's happening right now with, let's say, with TikTok. It's currently banned in Montana as we speak. There are different limitations, or algorithms change, or the preferred type of content changes. But organic has been around for almost 30 years. Google isn't going anywhere, even with AI on the roadmap, and the ability to run content fast by default with WordPress definitely made it one of the preferred tools of choice. Another option is the so-called CRUD flexibility. Now, it's really hard to expand unless you are a developer, but the thing is, it's really easy to create new types of data. Now, again, WordPress started as a blogging platform, so by default, it used to have posts for writing blog posts and pages for standard pages like about us, contact, privacy page, terms of service, and so forth. But there are so many different types of data that people need to have that are similar. They also have titles, description, and then some other pieces, right? Like products, like downloads, like houses if you're a real estate website, like bikes if you're a bike tracking website, right? So all of these are easily addable by just a single line of code or two. And of course there are so many different plugins that you can use instead. So that level of flexibility is so important. By definition, once you do that, introducing that post type, it comes with access control, with capabilities, with different options for editors and authors and subscribers and contributors, being able to access different pieces. That's all editable. You have, again, the admin backend with lists, with filters, filtering by date, by author, by so many different things. All of that comes by default. The block editor, adding categories and so forth, if you add registered taxonomies, all that comes by default. So saving hundreds of hours for creating new types of content, new admin editorial experience, new front-end experience, all that comes by default. So once again, in terms of competitiveness, WordPress makes it possible, and used to make that possible ever since WordPress 3.0 and even a bit earlier, to create new types of content both for editorial purposes and for front end and for complex searches, thanks to that custom post types and taxonomy engines. On top of that, there are different ways to query the database. Lots of different tools like WP query the class and some other query classes. Functions like get posts and some other post functions that you can call back code facades that you can build on top. You can call the DAO-PDB global variable and from variables. You can filter existing clauses like posts where and so forth on the fly. Essentially, you can do almost everything and filter everything, even having other plugins in play, interfere with the core process and say, okay, stop this. I see that this plugin is doing that. This team is doing that. Stop that. Cancel this. If that's the case, we don't want to do that, or do this redirect and so forth. So the ability to do that, it's almost unmatched in any other type of platform. Now, again, all these reasons led to the so-called market adoption and all the organic traction that WordPress sees. Now, there's a market share overview that's been more or less flat, but kind of slowly going up over the past year, where WordPress is currently covering about 43% of the web, right? We are talking about 4 out of 10 websites online are built on top of WordPress out of the first tens of millions of websites or so. So there's this market adoption momentum that whenever you reach certain level of clout, and whenever people talk about you and users use you more, it's really hard to stop that momentum, leading to WordPress growing for over a decade with about 2 to 3% year over year, reaching that momentum that we're speaking with. So this is just the kind of the snowball effect. It's hard to ignore, but it's really, really important to just acknowledge that and understand that whenever you combine several of those great, incredible features within the core platform, it's so hard for another platform to just come up and compete with that. Just take a look at the other competitive platforms like Shopify owning 4% of the web, other builders like Wix and Squarespace, 2.32%, open source platforms with under 2%. We are talking 10 times or 20 times or more difference between WordPress and any other popular platform on the market. This level of dominance, again, we just haven't seen anything like that in the web.
And
Now,
just to
yeah, go ahead. Uh, yeah, want to jump in?
sorry, go ahead, Mario.
Yeah, just I thought you want to say something. Yeah, let me jump right into the next one. So setting the standard again, when 43% of the web runs on WordPress, the other reason why WordPress is a powerful platform that cannot be ignored or its importance isn't understated is the fact that so many other innovations happen around WordPress or because of WordPress, right? The way GDPR gets adopted, accessibility standards in most cases depend on WordPress to decide on standards and adapt them in core. It's so important. Like they get ignored unless WordPress really pays attention to them. UI trends, security trends, hosting support of PHP versions, right? You can't move PHP versions forward unless WordPress supports them, because no host is going to jeopardize 50% of their customer base or so if WordPress doesn't support a specific version, or they won't be able to drop out and insecure versions unless WordPress decides to more or less threaten all the users that they need to switch to a newer version. Like so many things in the web are being set as a standard thanks to WordPress or because of WordPress. And in terms of business integrations, we often use WordPress as a command center, right? We use the WordPress dashboard or WordPress as a system to connect to other platforms and consolidate it from other platforms like HubSpot or Marketo or Salesforce or ERPs or revenue dashboards or whatever it is. And most SaaS and integration vendors just start with WordPress, right? If you are a third-party SaaS, the easiest way to gain market adoption is to integrate with the platform that runs 43% of the web. It's simple as that, right? Compared to the other systems, I'm going to scroll back up. Compared to the other systems running like 2%, 1% or so of the web, if you have to choose between, hey, I'm going to integrate for 1% of the web versus 43% of the web, what would you do, right? And that's why WordPress, keeps being a dominant platform for so long. It's just the trendsetter over here. Now, several other things to kind of consider. Um, do you want to introduce? I see some questions in the comments with the trivia question, or Wes? Okay, I see some drops here, but we may have delay in play due to the live stream, so I'm going to move right up and we can proceed with the comments. But anyone who's watching live, there are some trivia questions over here. Take a look at the comments, and yeah, I'll see you at the end of the stream as well. And in the meantime, proceeding with the next part of the puzzle. So another reason for WordPress to be a dominant platform is e-commerce, right? WooCommerce, as a kind of a company, started to get serious with the e-commerce space back in 2011. So it's been again about 12 years ever since e-commerce on WordPress became a thing, and it's been growing forward for several years after, up until the acquisition of WooCommerce as a piece of software. Now there are lots of different things that you can do with WooCommerce, and product management, inventory tracking. There are tons of different secure payment gateways, order fulfillment. It's something that you can use as a commerce system for traditional digital commerce, and again, product physical commerce with shipping and weight measurement and so forth. You can do subscriptions, you can do memberships, so many different things on top of the e-commerce as an ecosystem, meaning that specific industries and specific communities, so to speak, started to adopt WordPress because of WooCommerce and some of the other competitive platforms too. Because in some cases, in many cases, you can use WordPress and connect WooCommerce or another e-commerce gateway, and you get a powerful CMS system with commerce. But when compared to other competitive tools, for instance, such as Magento or OpenCart, you may have competitive commerce functionality for the most part, but you lack all of the features and all of the requirements that a CMS has, because they're exclusively designed to serve e-commerce businesses. Meaning that lots of e-commerce platforms fell behind because they were only focused on e-commerce, but a real e-commerce website requires that CMS functionality. It has memberships, login panels like coupons or discount. There may be, memberships for a blog, different post types or so that are outside of the commerce experience. So many different things that the CMS requires, which again made WordPress the more popular, the better option out here. So again, just stating it
Mario,
out there.
just to add on this point, like, are you, being in the WordPress development industry for so long, are you seeing like a shift where people are now trying to move from WooCommerce to Shopify? I understand that Shopify does have limitations and it charges you a bit more, but I think, being in the community, I've noticed that a lot of people are now finding out that a WooCommerce does in fact has a lot of limitations as well, and Shopify makes things much more easier for them. So I think people now are choosing ease of use as compared to learning things by themselves. Do you think there is a switch or a shift in this regard?
Yeah, so great question. And one of the things that I want to add is, first off, I also happen to be managing a Shopify app business, so I'm fairly familiar with the space, even if it's kind of competing with WooCommerce. However, at Devrix, we do manage some large WooCommerce platforms generating tens of millions in GMV on an annualized basis. So we definitely deal with large volumes of data and sales in the WordPress ecosystem. So speaking as someone who's both familiar with one of the ecosystems and with the other. Now, other hosted systems like Shopify are definitely presenting better user experience, and some of the other ecosystem/community-driven incentives for businesses. Now, as a hosted platform, they do provide better insights and intelligence to app developers and team developers. When a customer signs up, you get access to, hey, what's that website? What plan does it run? How many transactions, average order value for the past 30 days, and so forth, other extensions installed, and so forth. So it's a lot easier to figure out how to manage an individual customer on a case-by-case basis. However, what Shopify doesn't have is it's not open source by default, right? You have apps and themes, but it's not open source by nature. You can bend the core as much as possible. Shopify is also written in Ruby on Rails, so fewer people are actually able to work on its core compared to, again, PHP, which runs 77% of the web. Now, granted, apps can be written in different things, but you get the point. There are, however, other challenges with Shopify. Now, in terms of app developers and team developers, they often pose different limitations like, hey, we're updating that system. You need to be compatible. You have 10 days to comply with that, or otherwise we are delisting you from the store. Really common. Again, great business. I don't want to bash on them. They do provide certain opportunities, but they also threaten businesses a lot, right? You don't comply, you are blacklisted from the store. So really hard to just stay in line. And I've seen businesses going further because they get blacklisted from the App Store, and essentially you no longer have an opportunity. And in terms of businesses, I've seen dropshipping businesses scaling 5x and getting banned, generating millions of revenue on a monthly basis, getting banned for possible fraud reasons because they're scaling too fast, right? So being a hostage of a platform, even if it's a manual mistake, it's just as relying on your audience exclusively from Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or Twitter or whatever and getting your account banned, right? These are private companies setting their own rules, guidelines, whatever, and you can like they can change their opinion in a whim. Open source, you can. Like WooCommerce is there, it's open source. Same for WordPress, they're not going anywhere. WordPress is ran by the WordPress Foundation. And again, at any point in time, even if something horrible happens, you can fork WordPress and take it from there. Worst case scenario, which again, we don't see that happening. So yeah, again, there are competitive platforms. Again, same reason why other web building systems like Wix or Weebly or Squarespace or so exist. They do exist. They serve certain communities, but they also have lots of loopholes that, when spending enough time in the community, you can figure out how they can jeopardize a business. So again, pick wisely. If data protection is top of mind, you just need to do open source. Number 12, community. One of the reasons I switched to WordPress is the community. This is a photo of part of our team at WordCamp Sofia, which happened last month. And again, we met hundreds of other people. After the pandemic, it was a kind of breath of fresh air. Really exciting to just meet so many incredible, awesome people working on the platform. From bloggers, team developers, plugin developers, hosting companies, agencies, freelancers, designers, pretty much everyone working with the platform. So community is one of the strongest suits, if you ask me, when it comes to WordPress. Being supportive, being helpful, so much open source content, so many tutorials out there, affordable tools and services for everyone, great adoption for kids and students and everyone who just can't afford to directly start with an enterprise software. Another, again, great reason for that. Now, one of the things that people miss, and what we kind of double down on at Devrix, is using WordPress as an MVP toolkit. Now, we've had so many cases where someone needs to launch something in a couple of months, and with an enterprise software or with a framework, it's going to take anywhere from 8 months to 2 years, right? With WordPress, you can do that. In many cases, you are able to achieve that with premium theme, a bunch of plugins. Just prove the need, prove the case, right? Set it up, do a demo. I had a chat with a partner agency, again, a popular WordPress agency, and we discussed ChatGPT. And they said, hey, we actually use ChatGPT to generate code snippets, not for production code, but during sales meetings, right? Like, hey, let's create a random page that demonstrates this, right? Or hey, let's create a model in the dashboard with notifications or so, right? We just demonstrate the default look and feel from WordPress and say, okay, that's what this would look like by default. Like, how much time should we put into design or development or so, right? So open source plus WordPress and all the ecosystem of themes and plugins makes that possible. Really important to just understand. And because no code is so popular nowadays with Webflow and Bubble and Software and so many no code platforms, actually WordPress is the grandfather of all no code platforms. The ability to run a fully fledged, powerful app with 0 lines of code just by themes, plugins, and hosting is WordPress. So we shouldn't neglect that. Similarly, we use WordPress actively as an application framework, right? Either as a headless application, software as a service, so many different things, including mobile applications, again, third-party control dashboards for other systems. We just use the opportunity for WordPress to create and manage users, secure dashboard, capabilities, a team framework, or that CRUD for creating post types. So many opportunities to use it for whatever. And again, that's not something that you can easily do with another platform. And scale. We've launched over a dozen websites, over hundreds of millions of page views each. One of that systems that we scaled generated 973 million page views in a single month. That's 1/7 of the planet visited that website over the course of 1 month. And this website was built in WordPress, right? So the ability to support accessibility and inclusivity as a platform, as a community, the ability to work with kids and non-professionals and third world countries and pretty much everyone in any position and situation, because it's open source, because it can run on any laptop, even the oldest possible machine. You can start there, and at the same time you can take that very same starter system and scale it to 1 billion page views. Again, that's just unmatched. Platforms out there are either hobbyist, simple platforms that you can use as a starter, or enterprise that are just too expensive and too heavy and too hardcore, and you need to be at scale. Supporting both is almost non-existing. So again, just to sum up, again, it's more, the future of WordPress is more about the history of WordPress, right? We are here because of all these reasons, and how to use that, how to leverage that for the future. I only have a couple slides for that. Now, the future, with that solid of a head start, it's about maintaining the dominance for the coming decade, right? It's about refining user interface, refining user experience. It's about making it more streamlined for Generation Z and Generation Alpha, right? People used to Snapchat and TikTok, the simplified look and feel. People used to builders with 5 buttons, right? Refining that and improving just to be easier to use, just to hide some of that outdated logic from the dashboard, just to improve the full site builder, full site editing, and the blog builder is going to make the platform you know even better than existing solutions that excel in that specific thing alone, right? So getting some inspiration from things, that innovations that happen in other newer systems, and just adopting it to WordPress. What Matt said at State of the Word last year was spending more time on Tumblr, and Tumblr being migrated to WordPress, Tumblr being more focused on Gen Z and the younger audience, and adapting that as a user experience with notifications, with badges, with verified, with stories, with things like that, all built on top of WordPress. So kind of penetrating the social experience. So as a conclusion, once again, WordPress isn't going anywhere. It is an incredible ecosystem for pretty much everyone out there, from indie creators to solopreneurs, writers, designers, developers, agencies, freelancers, and pretty much everyone in between. Plugin, theme developers, businesses, hosting companies, like everyone. It's currently undergoing transformation, right? There are more no-code systems on the one hand, and Shopify, which you brought up yourself, and kind of other spaces trying to grab a piece of the WordPress puzzle, while WordPress at the same time is rebuilding the block experience and the Gutenberg experience and everything else. So a lot is changing right now. At the same time, we are in a recession, meaning that some businesses are going under, and funded startups are no longer able to access these funds to maintain systems that are no-code builders or so, and they're losing part of that audience, going back to the open source. So understanding the market economics is also important. As WordPress is still here, it's still open source, and there's still incredible solutions and affordable solutions to be able to host your website, obviously, like Huawei's. So having all of that in mind, happy birthday to WordPress. Really happy to be here and sharing that part of the story and my experience over here. Yeah, I'm not sure if we have time for questions, but yeah, that's kind of
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much, Mario, for this insightful talk. And I think you very rightly mentioned that WordPress isn't going anywhere. And although there are other page builders, you mentioned a few names, and obviously They are there to serve a specific community, and even those people who use those tools know that, there are limitations that WordPress doesn't have. It's open source. You can modify the code as much as you want. It's easy. Although I do have an opinion that WooCommerce, you mentioned WooCommerce, so with WooCommerce you have a slight learning curve, where if you want to
Mhm.
make more customizations, or if you want to make a lot of changes within your stores, there is a slight learning curve which Shopify might not have. But still,
Mhm.
if you go through that, everything's is amazing with WooCommerce, and with WordPress as well. So yeah, I mean, this was very insightful, Mario. I would like to thank you, because I think you are a pretty busy guy with your DevRix and your team. You develop amazing WordPress websites, and I really thank you for taking your time out today to conduct this session, to present your presentation. Very insightful stuff in there. So I would like to thank you, Mario, for this session. Any ending notes that you would like to end this session with?
Well, yeah, again, thanks once again for having me. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here. Again, 20 years is a lot. It's so important to just walk down the memory lane and see where we've started and how we've started, and just why we're here, right? Just reminiscing and both appreciating what we've gone through over the past 20 years and how far we've matured. Everyone participating in the WordPress community has facilitated that, right? Has facilitated both open source and the ability to scale high and also start small, and everything that we've covered here. So just being grateful for everyone listening and participating in the journey. And yeah, make sure you enjoy the remaining sessions up until the rest of the week.
Well, thank you, Mario. And on that note, I would like to end day two of Cloudways webinar week. Tomorrow, we have three amazing sessions lined up for you. First up is Leslie, who is talking about equity focused design. Then we have Michelle Freshet, who talks about inclusivity within WordPress community. And then finally, we will end day three on Francesca Moreno's talk about a non-developers release leads journey. So this is it for day two. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Mario, for your time again, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.